Hey folks, welcome back to Discerning Spirits, the show where we talk Enneagram types over classic cocktails. I'm your bartender, Dan Prevette.
And I'm your bar patron, Colton Simmons. And today we're talking about Type 6, the Loyalist. Dan, what are we making?
Colton, I'm going to answer your question with a question. When you think of Loyalists, what do you think is the most interesting thing about the Type 6?
Ooh, how prevalent it is, yet how hard it is to type.
Okay, well, I ran into that too with this cocktail, so I knew it had to be an incredibly classic, popular cocktail, but I also know that sixes tend to come one of two ways.
Yeah.
And incidentally, so does the whiskey sour. So we're gonna do two types of whiskey sours today. One whiskey sour we're gonna do with egg whites and one without. And we're gonna see the differences between those two. A little bit of whiskey, egg whites, fresh squeezed lemon juice, Angostura bitters, and a little bit of sugar. Classic, easy drinking. Two different drinks for two different types of patrons.
Ooh.
We'll see which one you like. All right, Colton. We're gonna do something a little bit different with the six. As you see, we've got two different kinds of sours. We've got the egg white sour, and we've got the just kind of the standard lemon simple whiskey sour. So you're gonna try both ones, and then you're gonna pick which one you're into. So the reason I wanted to do this with the sours is because, and I want to talk to you a little bit more about this, but sixes, you've got phobic and counterphobic sixes. It's the only type that has kind of two distinct types within the main type.
Yeah.
So my theory with the whiskey sour, obviously it's a classic favorite of many people. As a bartender, there were many times where somebody would order a sour and I would say, okay, do you want to go with an egg white sour? And you would get one of two answers. You either get like, no, just the no egg white, or like, yeah, sure, let me try it. Sounds crazy.
Yeah.
So I feel like the egg white sour, not quite as popular, but some people just want to go for it. And that's my counterphobic six. The other one, classic crowd pleaser, typically what people think of when we think of a sour. That's my phobic six. You let me know what you think, and you let me know which one you want to go with. I'll wait. I'm fine.
Oh, both very good.
Okay.
Smoother than I thought it was going to be.
Yeah, kind of creamy, kind of rich.
I know I've said in other episodes that I like them served up, but I'm actually going to go with the rocks.
You're going to go rocks? Okay,
reason.
Excellent. I'm going to take this one then.
It just feels a little bit brighter to me.
Yeah.
Which I'm digging right now for whatever reason.
The egg white is definitely kind of a complex element. It doesn't add much in terms of flavor, but it does add some texture.
Yeah.
It's very velvety, very soft. This is very bright, refreshing. I think when people think of a sour, this is what they're thinking of.
So good.
So let's talk a little bit about the six. And let's go ahead and get into phobic versus counterphobic sixes.
I think it's a good place to start because it is the most unique Enneagram type in that it does get segregated into two different halves, if you will. So everybody has their core sin or core struggle, use whatever terminology you like, but the sixes is fear. And so everybody reacts to fear differently, and it's kind of that fight or flight category. So that's what you have with phobic is the flight, the counterphobic would be the fight. And so they respond to fear two different ways, and because of that, it makes them look drastically different. And sixes are by far the hardest Enneagram type to classify in like a traditional Enneagram test or assessment. Sixes score all over the map because they can shift in so many different ways depending on how they're reacting to their environment, where they feel safe, and where they sense authority is, because their core desire is for safety and security, and all of that is focused towards authority.
Got it.
We can get into that more details, but that's the general like bifurcation between counterphobic and phobic sixes.
Got it. Well, speaking of fear, as I sip this, I realize that I have a fear of getting egg white in my beard, so I'm just going to be trusting you to let me know if that happens.
Yeah, I'll let you know.
The thing about sours, and I think another reason that I wanted to do this for the sixes, is that sours are one of those drinks that this is a whiskey sour, but there's vodka sours, there's gin sours, there's Midori sours. Sours have become so many different things. And that related to sixes for me because, correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems like sixes are a very well-populated number on the Enneagram.
Yeah, I mean, they believe sixes are the highest frequency of people there is. So
why would that be the case? What's happening there?
I'm not quite sure what causes people to become sixes so frequently, or what produces sixes, but fear is just a common emotion. I'm sure when I say like their common struggle is fear, I mean, everybody could be like, yeah, I struggle with fear. Very few people don't have some struggle with fear. But because we live in nations and states and go to school, we're always around authority figures. We're always around structure. It's very rare to be an individual who didn't have some sort of systemic authority structure from the beginning of your life. I mean, till you die. I mean, you go to work, you have a boss. We're surrounded by authority figures. You have a president, you have a mayor, governor, or whatever. And so it makes sense that would produce a lot of sixes who get reliant on authority, who get reliant on structure. And a lot of people grow up with rough childhoods. And so when you don't have a healthy authority structure modeled for you as a kid, you tend to seek it as an adult somewhere else. And so many sixes say they grow up with the father figure who was kind of either distant or gone, or a lot of sixes have a dad who was more of a playmate than an authority figure. And so then the mom kind of steps in and is this maternal authority figure, but it creates a weird kind of push-pull with the six where they want structure, but they're not getting the structure and safety they desire or they know that they need. So when they grow up and go out into the world, they really harp into structure, authority, and safety, and they got to find it somewhere.
So what are some of those core traits that somebody might identify in themselves or in somebody close to them that is a pretty key giveaway that you might be dealing with yourself or another person as a six?
Yeah, so I'll start with phobic sixes. So phobic sixes rarely express an opinion that is harsh or divisive. They are the ones that are like, well, let's just have like polite conversation. Counterphobic sixes are going to be a little bit more abrasive, and they often get mistyped as eights. The big difference, the way you can kind of tell you're dealing with a six and not an eight, is when sixes ramp up and get angry and start attacking, if you can hold your ground, a lot of times they'll come down. If you push against an eight that's exploding and irate and coming at you, if you push against them, they just rise up. They go another level higher. So a lot of times sixes have a desire to be connected. They're very social creatures. They love people. So that's a big earmark, whether or not they're phobic or counterphobic. There's kind of a desire. That's why they're called loyalists. Because once they're on your team, they're on your team. Yeah. They're not going anywhere. So they very much have a need to cling to people, especially people who feel like a security blanket or feel committed. So they will commit themselves to people that maybe aren't the best for them.
Yeah, that actually reminds me, I've heard on some occasion that if sixes are prone to an unhealthy behavior, it's the tendency to sort of go down with the ship, as it were.
It's funny because they say that sixes have a hard time with success because success feels a little bit more risky than just survival. So in relationships, there's not a high aspiration for perfecting things or ambition because they're just kind of happy to have you there. And so that transcends relationships. It could be business. You could have a six that is a successful business owner. I guarantee you they're extremely uncomfortable with it. Because they will kind of more used to underdog causes going down with the ship. They kind of almost expect that lack of security, which is why they chase it so frequently.
I see. What are some of the things that sixes are bringing to relationship or bringing to their own lives on the positive element? And what are those ways that they can kind of intentionally step into that more positive direction?
Sixes are sweethearts, man. Like sixes, for the most part, are very lovable people. One thing that they can do, because they struggle with anxiety the most of all of the head types, because they're in the head triad with 5, 6, and 7. They're the impinged type because they're the one in the middle. They're, no matter which way they go, they're in their head. So if they can learn to recognize anxiety and fear, that kind of underlying wave, that tremor of anxiety, if they can recognize that and find ways to express it healthily, not deny it, but just acknowledge that it's there, then they kind of move into that 9 space where they're okay with it. They're accepting of themselves, and by proxy of being accepting of themselves, they're accepting of everybody else.
Yeah.
So when they're cool with their anxiety and their fear, and they can say like, yeah, I'm a little nervous about my living situation, and be okay taking up space in other people's lives with their fears, and not just being the nice, kind, committed person, then they can really be this kind of 9 peacemaker. They go into integration mode, and they just become a real source of healing and safety for everybody else. They kind of become what they want in someone else. So they have boldness, and they can take risks, and it comes from a very healthy, calm, balanced, confident place.
Right. What I think is interesting about 6s is that while the negative direction for so many numbers is unfortunately can really be quite unattractive, but 6s are one of those numbers where even in an unhealthy space, the unhealthiness is still sort of fun and lovable. Like Larry David is sort of like a famous 6.
Yeah, like losing his mind. George Costanza.
And it's that kind of like the manic anxiety is still like a little endearing and at least funny to watch.
Yeah.
So that must be that. I mean, I can imagine that would be a little tricky for 6s to have to navigate that and find their own way when they're constantly looking for someone to maybe show the way for them.
I think they kind of trap themselves every once in a while, because 6s go to 3 in unhealth. So they kind of take on that competitiveness of the achiever, that individualistic pride, and I'm going to do it myself and rise to the top. So they can get themselves into some situations where the spotlight's on them and everybody's looking at them. And to some degree, it's attractive because it feels like confidence, but it's more of a veneer of, for all their competitiveness and ego. It's definitely an interesting balance, because they are lovable people, except for, counterphobics are probably less charming than the phobic 6s are.
How so?
They just attack what they're afraid of. Sometimes it can make them super fun. They look like 7s because they become adventurers. Like they're like, screw fear, I'm going after this. I'm going to go bungee jumping, skydiving, be in the military. Like, I'm going to get a gun. And they can seem like the toughest person in the room. Again, seeming lovable, seeming like protective, like a security figure you want to have as your best friend. To have your back kind of thing. But they also are suspicious folks. So a lot of times, even if it looks like they're conquering their fear, they're still nervous about everybody else around them. And sometimes counterphobic 6s will complain a lot, or just throw out gripes or like harsh words to see how people respond around them. It's kind of like a test, like, are you with me? Are you not? Can I dominate you? Are you weak?
At their best, what do you think 6s are able to bring to the world to make it better for the rest of us?
Bravery, man. Like at their best, because fear is what they struggle with most. Once they have conquered it, they've conquered it better than anybody else could ever imagine conquering fear. It's kind of like, your mortal enemy, you know what I mean? Like Sherlock and Moriarty. They are intimately aware of each other because they're constantly going at it. So when 6s work through their issues and work through their fear, they can be some of the most inspiring, self-sacrificing figures in society.
Right on.
Yeah.
Well, cheers, my friend.
Cheers.
And to those of you out there watching, the next time you're at a bar, or even if you're just wanting to make something new at home, try a whiskey sour. Can't go wrong either way. If you want to go with the classic, or if you want to be a little bit adventurous with the egg white, it's delicious, it's refreshing, and pretty much everybody loves them. Cheers.
Cheers.